4.
Tips for making dungeons that make you go, hey, that's pretty good. Step 1, context. Some dungeons just completely fail to justify why they should exist in the world. When a dungeon lacks context, it doesn't contribute to the world building, and at worst, it can risk feeling out of place.
Watch out!
To look at a dungeon that has great context, we're gonna check out Dragon Roost Caverns from the Wind Waker. Dragon Roost Caverns is the first dungeon in the Wind Waker, and it does a great job of fitting into the world around it. Here's 3 ways that Dragon Roost Island has good context. Reason 1 is that Dragon Roost actually serves a purpose for existing in the world. It's a cultural shrine for the Rito and acts as a rite of passage for their people. Any fledgling Rito has to brave the caverns to receive a scale from Valu himself, which allows the Rito people to fly. This not only justifies the way the dungeon is designed inside, it explains why the dungeon itself is a dangerous area. The sacred shrine has been corrupted by Ganon, and now Valu is unable to give any more scales. So far, we're still solidly in the "this land was cursed by a dark force, so now you must defeat some evil being to cleanse the land" trope, which is strong throughout the Zelda games. But Dragon Roost Island adds a little something extra by showing how the boss monster is specifically screwing things up for the people. Goma is actually living beneath Valu and hurting his tail, which causes the great dragon to rampage. It's a great extra touch and feels like a more concretely satisfying problem to solve than just cleaning up the ambiguous dark energy in the area. Second, the reason you enter the cavern is organic. Lots of dungeons repeat the trope of some sacred relic residing in its depths, so you have to recover said relic as another stepping stone of your quest. Here, that relic is in plain sight, and you go into the caverns with a slightly more nuanced motivation. Interestingly, nobody tells you to go in there. In fact, the Rito would probably try to stop you if they knew what you were doing. Link only goes into the cavern because he knows the Rito tribe can't help him on his quest until the ongoing crisis with their sacred guardian Valu is solved. Also, he's concerned about Medli going into such a dangerous situation trying to scale the caverns by herself. This concern turns out to be very justified later on. Third, the item has real purpose. This is one area where a lot of Zelda games fall short. Why is there a hookshot in Dompe's graveyard in Ocarina of Time? What is a Gauntlet of Strength doing just chilling on the hands of the Spirit Temple? Not to mention, the whole idea of every item in the game being stored in identical chests across all dungeons, while understandable from a game development perspective, kind of breaks immersion. Dragon Roost is a whole nother story though that bucks the trends of the series. Instead of a chest, Medli just straight up gives you the grappling hook after you free her from a cage near the top of the roost. As it turns out, the grappling hook is a common tool used by the Rito to climb up to Valu when they can't fly themselves. This is great because it now makes sense why the grappling hook is an item that would help you get through the dungeon. It makes sense given the layout and the structure of the dungeon, and it doesn't feel like parts of the dungeon were artificially constructed so the item could be used. Dragon Roost Island is one of the most recognizable areas in any Zelda game, and we'll be dissecting its strengths and weaknesses throughout the rest of the video. I think part of what justifies its reputation though, is how well it integrates the story of your time there with the dungeon to create a cohesive environment which continually drives the narrative of your adventure. Part 2. A good theme can make the difference between a dungeon that's an epic part of your adventure or a total slog. If the atmosphere of your dungeon isn't unique or exciting, how can you expect the player to be engaged while playing it? For instance, Breath of the Wild is an amazing game in a lot of ways, but it has a bunch of these mini dungeon shrine areas that all have the pretty much exact same setting. After playing about 50 of them, I was getting bored.
Welcome back. Oh, wonderful. Well done. You were close.
Heading back to Dragon Roost, we see a really nice theme in a lot of obvious and subtle ways. The inside of what looks to be a volcano is always inherently cool, but it's not exactly unique. Video games have a well-known obsession with lava, and a simple fiery playground wouldn't be enough to stand out on its own. Fortunately, Dragon Roost amps it up by being filled with a ton of thoughtful details. Every so often, the screen shakes and you hear a rumbling noise. It starts out pretty vague and becomes more distinct the further you climb up. Once you reach the top, you can hear Valu roaring in pain because of the monster below. This evolution of a thematic detail builds anticipation and suspense for what's to come, and helps keep the player on edge throughout the dungeon. Steam shoots out of the walls and floors, and lava plumes periodically shoot up from below, showing this environment is very much alive. You're forced to confront this threat of lava by crossing precarious bridges and creating temporary platforms of cooled magma to get places. Both of these situations put you in escalated danger of falling to the fire below and create even more suspense for the player. Runes and drawings are present throughout the whole dungeon, tying in the context that this is a sacred place for the Rito and giving the setting much more meaning than a nondescript volcano would have. The setting itself is split between 3 distinct environments: open lava chambers, dark corridors, and the outside edge. These transitions help maintain variety, and the outside sections are especially cool because you can see how high you are climbing, which creates even more suspense for the player. Medley's presence also helps the theme because it changes the dynamic of the dungeon from just explore this volcano and find cool treasure to someone is probably in danger, and the faster you reach the top, the sooner you can save them. Finally, the music. The track is very ambient, as most dungeon themes are, but it does the job very well. A constant, almost tribal drumline beats in the background that will probably fall into your subconscious as you play. Every so often though, there are flares that re-grab your attention. It's a good balance that avoids being too in your face or too uneventful. Part 3! Smart teaching. One of the most difficult parts in designing a dungeon is striking the balance between challenging the player and adequately teaching them the mechanics to be able to solve the puzzles. If a dungeon is too easy, the player will get bored. But if it doesn't teach how to solve its problems well, then the player will be left feeling kinda lost. Boy, Johnny, it's time to teach you how to play some video games. Alright, where do I start? Oi, Johnny, you see this? This is a game controller. And there's one button you need to be concerned with on this game controller. If you want to do anything, Johnny, just press this button right here, Johnny. There you go. That's all there is to it. Oh, thanks. This seems pretty easy. I guess I'll just give it a try. I know you'll do great things, Johnny. I've prepared a game for you to play. Here, come on, I'll show you. It's a good introductory title. Thanks.
12 seconds later.
It's just not right.
I, for my part, not seeing you die.
Every time I've played Dragon Roost in the past, I've taken for granted how the dungeon teaches you every concept needed to solve each puzzle. This is actually pretty brilliant because it shows the game managed to teach me without ever feeling like a tutorial. Upon closer scrutiny, we could break down every room and show exactly how it teaches the player. Here's just a few cool examples. The first room shows that sticks can carry fire to light torches and interact with the environment. To obtain these sticks, you have to break the pots in the room. Next to the normal pots are pots filled with water. They serve no use in this room, but by breaking them, you know what they are and will be ready to use them later on. In this tunnel, a Boko breaks out of a pot and you can use its sword to break a wooden barrier. The game is showing you that Bokos can break out of pots, so that in this room, when they're hiding in the pots, you can deduce that they might be in there. In this room, you're forced to fight a Boko on a bridge. By fighting, you will accidentally damage the bridge and show it sag downward. This is a clue that the bridge is breakable and you'll actually have to cut down the other ropes to keep progressing. This formula of showing players small details that will stay in their subconscious and then make the player use those details to solve puzzles later is a genius strategy because it makes the player more likely to figure out a puzzle, and figuring out puzzles are a source of satisfaction for the player. When new rooms do need to teach concepts by themselves, they do so in a controlled way. In this room, you have to figure out that you can throw water pots on the lava to form platforms. The game eliminates all distractions by taking away most elements except the pots and the lava, so the player's experimentation will be limited to using objects that will eventually lead to the player's success. When there are multiple possible approaches, it's best to enforce that a wrong method is wrong by clearly punishing the player for messing up. In this section, you have to cut 3 ropes at once. If you only cut 1 rope, the whole platform tilts over and you are quickly plummeted towards the lava. Another good strategy is forcing the player to adapt their knowledge to new situations in a novel way. In the boss key room, you have to use a magtail to hold down a switch to access a chest. Normally, the easiest way to kill magtails is parrying them, which instantly kills them. If you just hit them a few times though, it will curl into a ball that you can use as a weight. Fighting them this way is more difficult and requires players to shift their paradigm of kill every enemy in the most efficient way possible to solve the puzzle. When a cool implicit puzzle like this doesn't work, fitting in an explicit explanation is better than just leaving the player to their own devices. For instance, Medley specifically tells you how to use the grappling hook, which is good because it's not immediately intuitive how to use it, and it's really just a tool for solving other puzzles. Plus, it just makes sense that since she gave it to you, she would tell you how it works. Ultimately, you can expect the player to apply concepts you've taught them, but never assume a player will understand the purpose of something you've designed, unless it obeys extremely common sense. Think gravity, or wood being flammable. The one place I think Dragon Roost may not teach the player very well is the boss. It's obvious to me after playing so much that I grapple Valu's tail to bring the ceiling down on Goma, but I could definitely see myself just trying to hit Goma over and over again and getting nothing done if I was a first-time player. Maybe one hint they give is when you try to grapple Goma's eye, it's possible you'll accidentally target Valu's tail. But regardless of that last example, you can see Dragon Roost is exemplary in guiding you and minimizing the chance of getting stumped or frustrated. As a note of caution though, don't feel scared to challenge the players. Dragon Roost is a first dungeon, so it doesn't attempt to be too ambitious for the player. It's really just trying to ease them into the idea of dungeons as a whole. I think the best way of judging whether your challenge is fair or not is just through playtesting. If you come up with an idea and you're unsure about it, just get other people to test it out and they'll tell you whether or not it works and whether or not they were confused. Part 4, Exploration. At first glance, this one seems pretty obvious. I mean, would you rather explore a dungeon with lots of branching paths and secrets? Or would you prefer a linear series of rooms with just one path? Upon further analysis though, I think there's a bit more to it than that. This is one area where I think Dragon Roost and a lot of other dungeons fall short. On the one hand, Dragon Roost is pretty good about showing the player potential future paths early on in the dungeon, making them wonder how will they get there, and making the whole dungeon feel interconnected. On the other hand, there's really only one way to go through the dungeon, and essentially no branching pathways to let you choose your own direction. There are a couple of optional chests with some treasure charts, one of which does require you to backtrack with the grappling hook to obtain, but essentially nothing substantial beyond that. Being a first dungeon, this is understandable, but more optional chambers with secret goodies would have made the dungeon feel more rewarding, and also more organic, because real-life structures are usually not linear pathways. The major concern devs would probably have with the branching choice in dungeons is the potential amount of extra work involved. If there are 3 paths to explore in a dungeon instead of 1, does that equal 3 times the work? Well, not necessarily. There's a well-known concept in game dev known as the illusion of choice. A path may appear to have many branching options to the player, only for all those paths to converge shortly later. This might sound like a dirty trick by the devs, but it's really a win-win if used correctly. Paths can converge together, and secrets can be as simple as a hidden wall or a fake tapestry. And these things can still promote player discovery effectively. The complexity of a dungeon cannot independently make the dungeon fun to play. And going further, too much complexity can even be a bad thing. Extremely nonlinear dungeons can often become overly confusing, jumbled messes. Think how frustrating it is to backtrack and get that one key you missed in the labyrinth of the water temple. Or the disappointment of following a long path in the Great Bay Temple, only to realize the water levels are all wrong and you have to head back. Just as with anything, too much of something will always turn into a bad thing. Retreading my criticism of Breath of the Wild, this is one area where the game excels. Most shrines can be beaten in multiple ways, using whatever method you can concoct. Hyrule Castle, the finale of the game, is especially good at this. You can follow the outside path and a few combat trials to reach the top. You can explore all the inside rooms and discover the dungeon with the Hylian shield. Or, heck, you can even ignore all that and fly your way straight to the top. Each way is valid and completely different, and makes it really feel like you're exploring the castle rather than just participating in a programmed series of trials. I hope future games in the series adopt a model like Hyrule Castle in some future dungeons. That'd be super cool. There you have it. Follow these 4 tips and your dungeon will probably be pretty good. If you liked the video, be sure to smash like. And comment down below if you disagreed with anything I said or just want to add on to any of the points I made. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe. I'm actually starting a series soon where I analyze the design choices I make in my own project, so a sort of devlog kind of thing. Anyways, thanks for watching and welcome to the herd.